Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! I had worked my way up from a part-time sales associate over 5 years, learning everything there was to know about car parts and dealing with difficult customers. The afternoon shift was usually pretty quiet, but this particular day would turn out to be anything but ordinary. It started when a customer walked in, heading straight for the headlight section. Being the helpful person I am, I approached him and offered to check if the headlights would be compatible with his vehicle. He rudely declined, telling me he knew what he was doing and to stop wasting his time. When I rang up his purchase, I made sure to inform him about our store policy regarding opened electronic items being non-returnable. He barely acknowledged me before storming out. About an hour later, he came barging back in, slamming the opened headlight package on the counter. He angrily demanded a refund, claiming I had sold him the wrong product. When I asked if he had opened and tried to install them, he responded sarcastically, asking if I didn't know you had to open something to see if it works. I explained that if he had let me do my job and look up the part, he wouldn't be in this situation. He stormed out, only to return a few minutes later. This time he told me he had bought the correct headlights at our competitor and wanted his money back. I reminded him about our return policy on opened electronic items, pointing to the clearly posted notice on the counter. He became more aggressive, using profanity and saying he didn't care about the policy. He just wanted his money back or there would be hell to pay. I told him he needed to leave the store and that he was no longer welcome there. He refused, cursing and insisting he wouldn't leave until he got his $20 back. What I didn't know was that my co-worker had already called the police. The customer must have realized he wasn't getting anywhere because he started walking toward the exit, but not before making one final threat, saying he would shoot me if he caught me outside. When the police officer arrived, my co-worker directed him to me. After taking my information, he reviewed our security footage and collected statements from everyone present. When I provided the customer's information from our warranty system, the officer's expression changed. He warned me that he knew this customer and that he was dangerous, advising me not to take his threat lightly. I filed all the necessary reports and told both my store manager and district manager about the incident. Later that evening, the officer returned to tell me they had arrested the customer on outstanding warrants, plus the new charges. He mentioned that the district attorney would contact me about testifying. A few months passed, and I met with the district attorney to give my recorded statement. As the court date approached, I received unexpected news from the district attorney. He told me that the charges from our incident had been dropped because the customer had taken a plea deal for his outstanding warrants, which would put him away for a long time. Being curious, I took the day off work to attend his court hearing. What I discovered was shocking. He had been charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, illegal possession of firearms as a convicted felon, and multiple drug charges. The evidence was overwhelming and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. If he hadn't thrown a fit over a $20 return, the police might not have found him so quickly. My providing his address from our warranty system led directly to his arrest, all because he couldn't accept our return policy on an open set of headlights. Back in 2005, I was working a weekend job delivering Chinese food while maintaining my full-time position at a warehouse during weekdays. The extra cash helped, and the tips were usually decent since we were the only Chinese restaurant that delivered in our small town. The job was pretty straightforward. Take orders, deliver food, collect payment, and hopefully get a tip. The interesting part of my delivery route included this fancy prep school about 4 miles from the restaurant. These kids came from wealthy families, living in dorms that probably cost more than my yearly salary. Despite their privileged background, they were notorious for being terrible tippers. Most orders were small, usually under $20, so I didn't mind too much. One snowy winter night, I got an order from one of these prep school students. The school had this rule where all delivery drivers had to meet students at the cafeteria. Pretty standard stuff that all local restaurants agreed to. I loaded up the order and drove through the snowstorm to reach the school. Walking into the cafeteria with the food, I called out the customer's name from the receipt. No response. I waited for 10 minutes, but no one showed up. Since I didn't have a cell phone back then, I couldn't call the kid. Eventually, I headed back to the restaurant. When I returned, my boss, who spoke broken English, told me that the student had called asking about his food. When I explained that I had waited in the cafeteria for 10 minutes with no sign of him, my boss insisted that I should go back, saying the student would be there now. So I drove back through the snow. Guess what? Another 15 minutes in the cafeteria, and still no sign of him. By this point, I was fuming. This kid was wasting my gas and time when I could have been handling other deliveries. Back at the restaurant again, I told my boss about the no-show, and we set the food aside. Just as I was about to take another order, the phone rang. The cashier handed me the phone. It was him. With obvious attitude in my voice, I asked if he was the one who placed the order. He claimed he'd been waiting for me the whole time. When I pointed out that I'd been to the cafeteria twice, waiting 10 and 15 minutes respectively with no sign of him, he simply told me to come back, promising he'd be there this time. I made the drive back for the third time. Finally, I saw him waiting in the parking lot. A tall kid, probably 6'3", built like a football player. I might have been smaller at 5'8", but I wasn't worried about handling myself if needed. When I confirmed the order was for him, I told him the total was $15.30. That's when he tried to pull a fast one, claiming he'd spoken to my boss after our phone call and was told he could have the food for free because of the long wait. Without a word, I turned around and started walking back to my car with his food. He called after me about his food, but I just put it on my car seat. When I turned to face him, I noticed despite his size, he was just a 15 or 16-year-old kid, and I was 25. I knew I had to keep my cool. I asked if he had a phone, and when he said yes, I told him to call the restaurant. When my boss answered, I got on the phone and asked if he'd really told the student he could have the food for free. My boss was confused and denied saying any such thing. After hanging up and returning his phone, I called him out for trying to scam me. He quickly backtracked and offered to pay, but I refused, telling him he was banned from ordering from us again since we had his number and name. I brought the food back to the restaurant, and my boss let me take it home. The next day, my boss called me in early. The student had called his mother, and now both of them were at the restaurant. His mother demanded to know why I hadn't given her son his food. I explained how I'd tried delivering 3 times and missed other orders because her son wasn't where he was supposed to be, then tried to scam me. She insisted I should have given him the food anyway because of the wait, suggesting I was probably slow with deliveries. When I pointed out that her son would have had his food if he'd been at the designated spot and that I wouldn't tolerate his attempted scam, she threatened that we'd lose his business and she'd report me to the school. That's when things got crazy. She suddenly started swinging her bag at me, hitting me repeatedly while other customers tried to pull her away. My boss immediately called the police, who arrived quickly and reviewed our security footage. After taking statements from everyone present, they arrested her for assault. I pressed charges without hesitation. The incident actually led to some positive changes. The school implemented the new policy where students who weren't at the designated pickup spot when their food arrived had to pay a $5 fine, which went to the restaurant they ordered from. The mother ended up with an assault charge and was ordered to pay restitution for my medical bills from the bruising she caused. The student was also suspended from the school for 2 weeks for attempting to defraud a local business. The mother had to do 100 hours of community service, which included helping at a local food bank. Apparently, working with food service for free wasn't as fun as she thought it would be. I moved to upstate New York for graduate school, not knowing a soul. And like many broke students, I started with Craigslist roommates in a cheap, rundown place. After making some friends in my first semester, 5 of us decided to rent houses near each other for the following year. 3 rented one place, while my other 2 friends and I found a 2-story house a few doors down. The upper floor would be ours, with 4 undergraduate students living downstairs. Our original landlord seemed decent enough. He was upfront about everything: snow removal and water included in rent, separate billing for heat and electricity. He even explained how multi-unit properties legally needed separate meters for utilities, mentioning that water meters were expensive to install, which is why most landlords include water in the rent. Things changed when he sold the property in August. The new landlord, who claimed to own multiple properties in the area, seemed fine at first. He fixed things when asked and kept up with snow removal. His New Zealand accent and casual demeanor made him seem trustworthy. When I moved out the following May for a summer job in Asia, I expected the usual deposit deductions for cleaning. What I didn't expect was a $52 water bill charge, despite water being included in our rent. I emailed the landlord about the water charge, pointing out that it was supposed to be included in our rent according to the lease. 2 weeks passed before he responded, asking me to prove where it said that in the lease. I had my roommate scan the lease and sent it to him. Another 2 weeks went by before he finally agreed to send the money. The money arrived in late August, but here's where it gets interesting. He only refunded me, not my 2 roommates. He probably thought we wouldn't talk to each other since I was in Asia. During a video call with my friends, we discovered this discrepancy. My friends were shocked when I mentioned getting my refund, as they hadn't received theirs. When I expressed my disbelief, we realized the landlord was trying to scam us. We decided to contact the downstairs tenants and current residents to warn them. My friends eventually got their refunds after 30 days of pushing back, with the landlord being incredibly rude about it. 2 years later, I got an email from a law firm. One of the undergraduate students downstairs had a father who was a powerful attorney, and he wasn't happy about his son being scammed. During my phone call with a lawyer, the truth came out. The lawyer explained that they had investigated our former landlord thoroughly and discovered he'd been running this scam on multiple properties for years. When I asked if it was just the water bill issue, the lawyer revealed it was much bigger. The landlord had been illegally charging for water without having separate meters, among other violations. They were building a criminal case against him. A few months later, I learned the full extent of the landlord's comeuppance. Not only did we get our cleaning deposits back as part of a settlement, but the landlord was facing serious criminal charges. His entire property empire was at risk, and as a non-citizen, his immigration status was in jeopardy. When I shared the news with my roommates, they were delighted. One commented on how fitting it was that he was being punished for trying to steal from broke graduate students. The other couldn't believe he was losing everything over trying to scam us out of $156. I remarked that this is what happens when you try to con the wrong person's kid. He had to sell most of his properties to cover legal fees, and he was facing potential deportation. All of this because he tried to pocket $52 from each of us, thinking we wouldn't notice or fight back. Like many teenagers fresh out of high school, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. College seemed expensive and uncertain, and my parents had made it clear that I needed to start contributing to household expenses. That's how I found myself working at Kentucky Fried Chicken in our small town next to a military base. The job itself was pretty straightforward. Take orders, prepare food, keep the place clean. What made it interesting was our shift manager. He wasn't like the other managers who'd hide in their office doing paperwork all day. No, he was always on the floor with us, working the registers, helping with food prep, and making sure everything ran smoothly. He was strict about following company policies, but we respected him because he worked just as hard as we did. This one incident happened during my 6th month on the job, on a military payday Friday. For those who don't know, in towns near military bases, payday Fridays are absolute chaos. Every soldier and their family comes out to spend their fresh paycheck, and fast food places get completely swamped. We were in the middle of the lunch rush when this woman walked in. She had that look about her. You know the type, the one who's already decided she's going to have a problem before even reaching the counter. My manager was working the register, and I was nearby preparing orders. The woman approached the counter and demanded the 12-piece bucket with biscuits. My manager, always trying to help customers save money, started to suggest making it a meal deal with drinks. The woman immediately cut him off, stating that she didn't want any drinks. When my manager tried to explain the cost benefits again, she snapped at him, asking if he was deaf. I saw my manager's face change for just a split second before that customer service smile came back. He was always professional, but he had zero tolerance for rudeness. He turned to me and requested a 12-piece family fill-up, specifically mentioning to skip the drinks. Then he began meticulously entering each item individually into the register. Usually we'd just hit the combo button and be done with it, but since she insisted on no drinks, he had to enter each piece separately. The chicken, the biscuits, everything. I could see the total climbing higher and higher. The woman paid without looking at the price and stepped aside to check her bags. That's when another family came up and ordered exactly the same thing, but accepted it as a meal deal. My manager rang them up with a combo button, and their total was almost half what the first woman paid. When she heard the price difference, she whipped around so fast I thought she might get whiplash. She demanded to know why the other family's order was so much cheaper when they'd ordered the same thing. My manager explained with perfect politeness that since she had specifically declined the meal combo, he had to ring up each item individually as she had insisted. The woman became furious, accusing us of running a scam and demanding to speak to the manager. What happened next was pure poetry. My manager walked behind our divider wall, which was maybe 3 feet wide, and came back wearing his manager vest. He greeted her with professional courtesy, asking how he could help as if he were a completely different person. The woman's face went through about 5 different shades of red. She opened and closed her mouth like a fish out of water, clutched her overpriced chicken bucket to her chest, and stormed toward the door. As she was pushing the door open, she walked right into a group of soldiers coming in. Her bucket tipped, and while the chicken stayed in, all her biscuits went flying across the floor. The soldiers, being the gentlemen they were, immediately started helping her pick them up. But she was so embarrassed, she just screamed at them to keep the biscuits and practically ran to her car. The soldiers brought the scattered biscuits to the counter, and my manager gave them fresh ones on the house for being so helpful. We all had a good laugh about it, and for the rest of my time there, whenever someone got snippy about combo meals, my manager would just pat his vest pocket and smile. It wasn't just about the money she wasted by refusing to listen. It was about how treating service workers with basic respect could have saved her both cash and dignity. I worked that job for another month before heading off to community college, but that incident still stands out as one of the most satisfying moments of my first job experience. And yes, we did save one of those floor biscuits and put it in our break room with a little sign that read, "Listening is saving." The biscuit eventually went moldy and we had to throw it out, but the lesson remained. Sometimes being entitled costs you more than just money. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.